The big news in baseball this week is that Commissioner Rob Manfred made a decision on a petition sent by the Pete Rose family asking for Pete to finally be removed from Major League Baseball's ineligible player list, meaning that essentially he was banned from baseball. And what did Commissioner Manfred say on it? Well, he did conclude in a new, you could say, new ruling, since this is groundbreaking, territory, that in fact, yes, Pete Rose and 17 others, one of them including Shoeless Joe Jackson, were to be removed from the MLB inexcusable, or whatever you want to call it, the banned list essentially. And now they are technically eligible to enter the Hall of Fame. That's what it means. Now, just going over a quick summary of who Pete Rose was and Shoeless Joe, since again, these are players that played a very long time ago and were banned from baseball. Article 21 of the MLB kind of player code rulebook states that you can't bet on baseball as a player, or as basically any part of Major League Baseball. Cannot bet on the sport. It ruins the integrity of the game. And what happened? Shoeless Joe Jackson was first back, I believe, in the 1919 World Series as a member of the Chicago White Sox. That team was called the Black Sox for a reason, because the owner didn't pay the players enough money, and actually gamblers offered the players more money than the owner did to throw the World Series. And that is exactly what happened. That's why they're called the Black Sox, because they threw the World Series, and that really started a major investigation. I think it was actually in the U.S., you could say, not Supreme Court, but in the judicial system, found out it happened, and a lot of players were banned from baseball due to that. On the contrary, all 8 players were acquitted in a public trial that took place in 1921, and despite that, all 8 players were still banned permanently from baseball by the commissioner at the time, including Shoeless Joe Jackson. You probably, if you have seen the movie Field of Dreams, are familiar with Shoeless Joe Jackson in the movie. Claims he was never a part of it. Who knows in real life, but again, he is no longer banned from baseball. Now, Pete Rose is the all-time hit leader, one of the greatest hitters of all time. But while he was a manager, there was an investigation led by MLB, and they concluded that he was betting on games while managing a team, which is against the rules, and thus he was banned from baseball. Now, because of that, they served lifetime sentences. That is what Commissioner Manfred made the ruling on, is that rather than these being permanent, forever sentences, they're lifetime sentences. And since Pete Rose is dead and Shoeless Joe and all those other guys are dead, they therefore cannot, pose a threat to the integrity of baseball anymore, simply because they've passed on. And so with that, they are no longer on the ineligible list. They are no longer banned from baseball. Technically meaning, I'm sure in other facets, they're able to use those players for, you could say, promos or whatnot. Now, Pete Rose has still been welcomed back to some stadiums since then, and he's had some things, for historical anniversary sakes with the Reds or with the Phillies and other teams. As for Shoeless Joe and them, they've been dead for a lot longer, simply because they played in the 1910s. But with those things in mind, does that mean these players are going to be elected into the Hall of Fame? And really, quite frankly, the answer with that is probably not. And the reason behind it is because the Baseball Hall of Fame and Major League Baseball are not related together. Now, technically speaking, Pete Rose could have made it into the Baseball Hall of Fame even while being banned. He could have been on the ballot years ago, but whoever was in charge of the Hall of Fame at the time decided to keep Pete Rose off of the ballot. And now that technically, you could say ipso facto, by the way things go, technically, by the earliest potential Pete Rose could be on the ballot by people who are in the know is 2028, based on, I believe it's called the Veterans Committee, where players, old-timers you can say, are elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame that have passed their 10-year window to be elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame, or just played so long ago that it's a different game, different time. So with that, it's still up to the writers, the Baseball Writers of America, to elect all of these players into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, you can say, based on, statistics and how they played and whatnot, Pete Rose, without a doubt, is a unanimous Hall of Famer. He still leads Major League Baseball in all-time hits by a wide margin. That is not probably going to be passed ever. That's one of those things that, again, simply on that fact alone, probably should be in the Hall of Fame. But the writers, you could say the keepers of the Hall of Fame, are very strict on players that have had scandal and do not elect them if they are, in some sort of scandal and is not unanimously, or not really unanimously, but really do not have a clean image. You look at that with a lot of the players from the 90s and the steroid era. None of those players, or maybe one or two you could say potentially, but none of the main name players, we're talking Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, none of those players are in the Hall of Fame. All of them were not elected in their 10-year window. And the reason because of that, even though it wasn't proven that they used steroids, even though it is highly likely, the writers did not feel comfortable electing someone into the Hall of Fame that did not have a perfectly clean slate. And that's the same thing with these guys that are going to be able to, you could say, be re-eligible. That being Pete Rose, Shoeless, Joe Jackson, and these other guys. Because gambling on baseball as either a player or a member of Major League Baseball is a cardinal sin. I mean, that is the one thing you are not allowed to do. Even in, you could say today's culture, with gambling being so, you could say, widely accepted, and having sports books be major sponsors of each league, especially Major League Baseball, and you could say basketball and football and whatnot. So really, gambling in today's culture is a lot more accepted than it was back then. But even so, if you're involved in the sport itself, it is still a mortal sin to not bet on the game. You are banned, and banned for life, which is now, again, that's the new ruling. That is a lifetime ban. Is not an immortal ban, and that's kind of how it works. They're very strict on it. You can even see, earlier this year, I believe, or last year, an umpire by the name of Pat Hoberg, who's actually very good at his job, was let go by MLB and banned by helping someone make bets, by giving them information. It was found he didn't even place a bet himself, but that is just how important the integrity of the sport is and how seriously they take it in each league, especially Major League Baseball. And that is what happened with Pete Rose. Comment below if you think Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson should be in the Hall of Fame or not. And as always, like and follow for more.